Hey, we are two Star Wars nerds, and we're back with another Motivational Monday. We're just gonna keep trying this, We really, yes, we love Star Wars, but at the end of the day, we love helping people. We love impacting people's lives. We love pouring into them, encouraging them. And if you're listening to the sound of our voices, that's you. We want to help come alongside you and encourage you and lift you up.
Mm-hmm.
And why not just use Star Wars to do that? Out of all things, we can use some of the nuggets, the wisdom that has been placed into Star Wars.
Yeah.
So recently we've been going through the Phantom Menace. And just in the first few minutes, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi have this back and forth. And I'm going to read this to you, and then Keely and I are going to discuss this. So Qui-Gon Jinn starts by saying, "Don't center on your anxieties, Obi-Wan. Keep your concentration here and now where it belongs." And Obi-Wan says, "But Master Yoda said I should be mindful of the future." And in response, Qui-Gon says, "Not at the expense of the moment." And this connects so well, and there's so much to this.
Yeah.
But let's look at this first. Don't center on your anxieties, Obi-Wan. Keep your concentration here and now where it belongs. So what do you think about that?
I think that speaks to me, even though it's, Qui-Gon speaking to Obi-Wan. I think this is a relatable quote to a lot of people in the world, because when we center our attention or focus on what's going wrong and the anxieties, we're just going to get wrapped up in that. And I know personally for me, a lot of times I do like future trip, and you're thinking of what can go wrong. And when in reality, those bad things haven't even happened yet, but my mind's so wrapped up on them. And then it, stirs up this anxiety. And I have to remind myself sometimes, like, okay, stop thinking about things that haven't even happened yet, or what could go wrong, or, just be in the moment right now and wait for this moment to happen, see what happens, and go from there. And I think that's what Qui-Gon's saying. He's like, we don't exactly know what's going on, so don't get wrapped up in what all these possibilities of what could go wrong, because what if that's you're wasting your time, really. You should be focusing on the moment that you're in right now. And I think on top of that too, when you're focusing on the moment, that if you're not focusing on the moment you're in right now, you're going to miss out on a lot. And because your mind's going to be so distracted. And so I think this is really powerful, and I think it speaks to a lot of people.
Yeah. And when you're talking about anxieties and future tripping, I have this propensity to think about all of the options of what could happen in any given situation. And typically from there, then I start thinking of, okay, well, what are the outcomes after that outcome? And this decision tree starts within my mind that is massive, and it's overwhelming. And I've had someone tell me this, that I had paralysis by analysis, that I was trying to figure everything out, and it actually stopped me dead in my tracks. I never got anything done because I was always thinking about what could happen. And what I found is this, that gave me comfort because I felt like I knew what to expect. But then when the human variable came in, and I'm surrounded by people who have free will,
right?
All of a sudden you realize you can't figure them out. Because I've been around, we work with teenagers. I've been around teens who just do wild and crazy stuff, and I'm like, why did you do that? And like, I could have never planned for how to stop that from happening. And it's just because something popped into their head and they did it, because it's like, why not?
Right.
Like, a side note, story time with Chase. When I was a teenager, that was me. I just did whatever popped into my mind. And I remember I was with a group of friends, and we went to a parking garage at a mall, and we're just like, I think there's some snow on the ground, so we're like throwing snowballs at each other, and we're like jumping over bushes. We're like 12 years old, just like getting crazy, and we started jumping off things. And then it was like, hey, well, why don't we jump off the first level of this parking garage? And so we all do it. And then it's like, hey, who wants to jump off the second level of the parking garage? And, a lot of them started backing out. It was like me and another guy who were like, yeah, we'll do it, right? And so we jump off of the second story of this parking garage. And I could, as I like jump, I feel the weight pull me down. Like I feel my own weight and gravity connecting and pulling me to the ground. And then we're like, hey, I double dog dare you. Let's do the third story. 12 years old, the stupidest thing. We had no idea how badly we could have gotten hurt or even worse. And when I'm thinking about that, the whole reason for that story is that we cannot predict human nature. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people just do things because they feel like it. Like 12-year-old Chase jumping off of a parking garage just because he's like, I want to see what happens.
Right.
And so when we're centering on what can happen, I think that really what ends up happening is we want control of a situation. But like you said, and what Qui-Gon says, it's at the expense of the moment. Mm-hmm. We actually end up missing out on what's in front of us.
Mm-hmm. And I think being mindful of the future is different than centering your anxieties on what may go wrong. Like, I think there is, obviously, it's Master Yoda. Like, he knows what he's talking about. So I don't think Qui-Gon's necessarily disregarding that, but he's saying that Obi-Wan's centering on anxieties. He's not mindful of the future. He's just kind of responding with that. Being mindful is different than being freaked out or paranoid.
Yeah. And, here's the thing. Maybe this sounds like a radical thought to people, but you can actually live an anxiety-free life. Mm-hmm. Anxiety is not a trait that you have to hold close to your chest. It's not a badge you have to wear. Mm-hmm. It's real and it can be crippling, but anxiety is not something you have to have.
Right.
You can actually live in peace.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually live in clarity of mind. You can actually live in joy. Depression is not something that you have to hold on to. Mm-hmm. And when you're in the thick of it, that's not what you want to hear.
Right.
But the reality is it's possible to live in such a way to where that doesn't overcome you. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, this past year and a half has been extremely hard for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of anxiety of well, what if it gets worse? What if we go back? What if I lose my job? What if I lose my house? And people start to spiral. But what ends up happening is you can not live your life and you can just never do anything because you're so mm-hmm. afraid of the what ifs. And like you were even mentioning, there is a real possibility of, I'm going to think about things. Mm-hmm. I want to be mindful.
Yes.
I want to do things in wisdom, but at the same time, not at the expense of the moment.
Yes.
You don't want to waste your life because of fear and because of anxiety.
Right.
And instead, there's something about just living in today. Mm-hmm. Because here's a reality that we've talked about. We're 29 and almost 30 years old. Mm-hmm. But we've talked about at a young age, you don't know when your last day is your last day. Mm-hmm. So in all reality, there's something to just living in the moment. Mm-hmm. And there's something to being present, to actually setting your phone down.
Right.
And there's something to actually connecting with family and be I'm not going to do it later. I'm going to do it now. Those things I've been wanting to do, nothing can hold me back. I'm actually going to do it mm-hmm. now.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think it's really important because we have to be intentional with those things because like we talked about last week in our Motivational Monday, it's easy to focus on what's wrong. It's easy to focus on, for whatever reason, those things that can go wrong. But it's so true that that we have to be mindful of not just the future, but the moment that we're in. Like, look around at what's going on, look for the good. And I know, I've struggled in the past with anxiety, and I have been healed of that. And so just seeing and reflecting back on that and where I used to be and where I am now, I know that I had to be intentional, and I had to focus on the right things, and I had to get rid of things that were pulling me back into that. So even when that anxiety does try to come, like I remember what it is, and I'm like, no, I don't have to listen to that, and it's gone in a moment, because I know I can turn to something else. So I think, especially in, like you said, this past year, it's so crucial that we don't focus on future tripping and at the expense of what's happening right now, because we can find those beautiful things.
Yeah, and as a closing thought, I'm reminded of this, that there was one time we lived on a 3rd floor apartment, and we were just surrounded by concrete. There was little patches of greenery. But I remember climbing the stairs all the way up to our apartment, and in between like those like cracks in the concrete, to separate the slabs, there's a little bit of dirt that maybe had collected, I suppose, and it had just rained, and I noticed this tiny green bud sticking up out of the concrete. And I just remember I had this moment where I stopped, and I'm, out of all things, coming home from work or the store, it was irrelevant, but I stopped, and I'm looking at this life coming, like in a literally impossible situation. Somehow life still found a way. And I'm thinking, a lot of times maybe you feel like you're surrounded by hard, impossible situations, but literally there is it's almost like this amazing grace that life can come in those situations. And what anxiety wants to do is it wants to center on the difficulty surrounding you, instead of like, I'm going to just be real. I'm going to be transparent. I'm just going to be in the moment, and I'm not going to focus on all of these what ifs surrounding my life. And so for those of you who are listening, I would encourage you to maybe just examine your today, to examine your moment, to examine what in your life is making you anxious, and to let go of that, and to just begin to be more mindful of your present.
Yeah.
To actually live in the moment, to stop future tripping, and to just make a resolve that you're going to live your life to the fullest, just right here and right now. We are 2 Star Wars nerds, and may the Force be with you always.